Topping today's news, 2 men shot to death while on the Fox Hill Community Park. The national security budget decreases after relaxation of the COVID enforcements. More than $250 million on Family Island Airport redevelopments, and government and opposition members butt heads on the final day of the mid-year budget debate. Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Jcn Saunders. This is your JCN Evening News. It's a pleasure to have you join us. What began as a quiet evening quickly became the scene of a double homicide as gunshots sounded through the air in the Fox Hill community. The lives of 2 males believed to be in their 30s were snuffed out by 2 assailants. This latest incident taking place in Fox Hill on the community park. Chief Superintendent Michael Johnson, officer in charge of the Criminal Investigation Unit, gave the following details.
Okay, sometime around 8:45 tonight, police received information of gunshots being discharged in the area of the park in Fox Hill. When the officers arrived on the scene, they met the lifeless body of 2 individuals, 2 males, that were just north of the park. EMS was called, examined the bodies, and found no signs of life. The basic information that we have thus far is that these 2 persons was in this area conversing when 2 males came from the rear of a trailer that is just north of the Jungle Club. One of these males was armed with a high-powered weapon. They approached these individuals and opened fire, shooting them multiple times about the body. No signs of life of these individuals were discovered on examination by EMS.
While at the scene, officers could not provide a motive behind the killings. However, Chief Superintendent Johnson did reveal that one of the victims was known to police and was on bail for several murders and was also being monitored via ankle monitoring device. The second victim was not known to police and is believed to have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. To that end, officers are making this appeal to those of you who may find yourself in the company of people accused of serious crimes.
Again, I have said this on numerous occasions, and the commissioner also reiterated this, that if you are familiar with someone who is on bail for a serious offense or serious offenses, you would be careful and be careful of hanging around persons of that said character, even if it's your family members, because you could end up being a target as well.
Both men were residents of the Fox Hill community, with unconfirmed reports identifying them as Pashashito Ross, aka Ryder, and Alfred McKinsey. Police are asking anyone in the community with information to contact the Criminal Investigation Department at 502-9991 or 502-9992-3. Also on the scene was Deputy Leader of the Free National Movement, Shannon Cartwright, who himself grew up in the Fox Hill community. He is calling for a non-political collaborative effort to address the crime problems in the country.
Aside from my role as the Shadow Minister for National Security, Fox Hill is an area that I grew up in, and so a lot of the persons who are here are like family to me. And so I thought on both of those scores it was important for me to come out here tonight and to see, to get as much information as I could, and to talk to many of the family members and friends, persons who were friends, about what transpired the other night. But this continues to be an unfortunate thing in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And I think all of us, the sense of outrage, we're past the sense of outrage. And this isn't about pointing fingers, this is about how do we come together, especially in this 50th year, and talk about the things that will make us even a greater country. And these are frankly some of the issues that we have to talk about. How do we get to this? And most importantly, what can we do to heal our society, to heal our communities, and to do what we can to stop this level of gun violence in the country. We all need to come together, political leaders, religious leaders, civic leaders, and just right-thinking Bahamians who've just, had enough.
According to JCN's record, this double homicide is the country's 19th and 20th for the year, and presumably another person on bail for murder becomes either a victim or commits another murder. National Security Minister Wayne Munro also commenting on that double homicide in the Fox Hill community last night. Minister Munro confirming with reporters just before the weekly cabinet meeting today that one of the victims was on bail for 6 murders. He says it is these types of situations which are extremely unacceptable and are a part of the ongoing issues with the country's justice system.
We intend to engage with the Chief Justice to seek to assist the judiciary in doing all that we can do as stakeholders to make sure that the system is moved efficiently. It is unacceptable that somebody could be on bail for 6 murders. This was an individual who the police had charged with 6 murders. The other young man found himself in company with him, and when the persons came for him, he was caught up in the affair.
Now, as for what is going to be done to curb the issue of bail to murder suspects, Minister Munro says he and Commissioner of Police Clayton Fernanda recently met, and together they intend to urge the courts to remand individuals accused of murder, not only for their safety, but for the safety of the general public as well.
That yes, somebody is presumed innocent. So no doubt this young man's persons would say he was charged with 6 murders, the police just put them on him, he wasn't guilty. But we're finding in this country that when you are charged, people come for you. When they come for you, they affect innocent bystanders. Supreme Court is asking to identify persons who may wish to serve in temporary service as judges. This goes back to a point, and the Chief Justice is clearly responsive to it, that if we have 10 judges hearing criminal matters who have 5 weeks vacation a year, that's 50 weeks you lose. So if we find lawyers to sit in those courts for those 50 weeks, then you get 1 year of trial time automatically. It's like you get an extra judge without actually having to appoint and find a new courtroom. And so I'm happy to see that announcement. I'm happy to see that the Chief Justice is seeking to make steps to address this vexing problem of moving trials forward.
Minister Munro noted that a lot of time was lost during the COVID-19 lockdowns, and now the judiciary is trying to catch up. While he reported a decrease in the Bahamas national security budget, Minister of National Security Wayne Munro says there is no need for citizens to be concerned. He was speaking in the House of Assembly on Monday afternoon during the final day of debate on the mid-year budget. We hear more on his contribution in this next report. While making his contribution to the mid-year budget debate on Monday, Minister of National Security Wayne Munro explained that the national security budget saw a decrease because of a relaxation of the COVID-19 enforcement unit, which shaved off over $1 million from his ministry's recurrent budget. The minister explained that aside from the decrease related to COVID-19, the remainder of the national security budget saw an increase, including the Royal Bahamas Police Force and the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. As for the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the increase of recurrent expenditure by more than $1.81 million has to do with salary. Minister Munro explains why.
When the Prime Minister allocated me this portfolio and we met with the then Commissioner of Police and in continued meeting with the current incumbent, something was very clear. The side opposite appeared to have paid very little attention to resourcing the Royal Bahamas Police Force. And what we met in place was a deficit of, we were told, 900 officers. Well, the increase of $2.5 million over the allocation in the original estimate is a recognition by the Ministry of Finance that we have to fill that gap. And that is what has been happening.
Following that statement, there was a point of order by Opposition Leader Michael Pintard, who acknowledged that there was a deficit in manpower on the Royal Bahamas Police Force, but wanted to make it clear that the Minister administration met the manpower deficit in almost every rank on the force left by the Christie administration. However, Minister Munro says Mr. Pintard was not being accurate, and while pointing out the efforts by the Davis administration, he rejected Mr. Pintard's assertion that in every administration there are deficits of manpower on the Royal Bahamas Police Force.
Bottom line to it was recruitment during the last administration did not address the attrition rate of officers retiring being dismissed from the force and dying. You know, Marco City talks about every administration. It's untrue about this administration because in every year that this minister has been in the seat and the current Minister of Finance has been in the seat, we have recruited more officers than we have lost.
Minister Monroe says additional funding for the Royal Bahamas Police Force will continue as the Davis administration seeks to properly staff the police force, including 58 additional firefighters, with more firefighters currently being trained. As for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, there is an increase of $3.9 million in the recurrent budget, but at the same time, there is a decrease in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force capital budget. Minister Monroe took time to explain this as well.
There is a reduction that must be explained in the capital budget of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, and it is basically in the head acquisition of sea vessels. And the very simple point of it is this: provision was made to begin the acquisition of a new flagship HMBS A.D. Hannah. The procurement is still being worked out in the portal, and so there's a reduction by $2.24 million, but an amount is left to procure 4 safe boats, 41-foot safe boats.
Minister Monroe says the delay in the acquisition of the new HMBS A.D. Hannah is a result of the government waiting on bids from 3 shipbuilding companies. As for the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services, Minister Monroe says everything is straightforward and the government continues to move full speed ahead with improvements to the prison. Also coming out of Parliament, Deputy Prime Minister Chester Cooper, who also holds responsibility for tourism, investments and aviation, says the government is targeting a 20% growth in tourism in 2023. In January of 2023, there were 846,000 visitors, an increase of 166% from January 2022, and a 33% increase over 2019 with air and sea arrivals, which is also a trend in the Family Islands.
And we have every reason to believe that we are going to meet and or exceed that target. Mr. Deputy, as you know, 2019 was a banner year for tourism in this country, with over 7.2 million visitors to our shores. And when we look at what is happening in 2023, we are shattering 2022 numbers and 2019 numbers. And that's great news. What is even better news that I am able to reveal is that we saw nearly 1 million visitors come to the Bahamas in the first month, in January, first month of this year alone.
Grand Bahama in January this year saw a 400% increase in sea arrivals compared to the year before. Increases were also seen in New Providence, Exuma, Abaco, Andros, Berry Islands, Bimini, and Cat Key. Add to that, for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, departure tax collections totaled $71.5 million, an improvement of $45 million or 85% over the prior year. The Deputy Prime Minister was also pleased to announce that in the first half of the year, 73.7% of the budget target for departure taxes was collected. Now, the Deputy Prime Minister chided the official opposition, noting that despite the FNM's forecast of fiscal implosion, value-added tax was reduced but still generated over $600 million so far, an increase of nearly $25 million when compared to last year.
Things are by no means perfect, but they're already getting better. But the overperformance of revenue is indicative of the momentum engendered by our relationship and our relationships and our administration. Mr. Deputy, there are those who say this all had nothing to do with us. But I say nonsense. They're wrong again. Madam Speaker, what the opposition, Mr. Deputy, what the opposition never seemed to understand while in office is what I told them over a 4-year period consistently, many, many times, is to focus on economic growth, because economic growth is the key.
Deputy Prime Minister Cooper says, although there is still much work to be done with much economic inequality in country, the government is shaping an economy that is robust and ripe with opportunity. Prime Minister Philip Davis wrapped up the 2022-2023 mid-year budget debate, but not before taking the official opposition to task. Prime Minister Davis blasted the former administration, asserting that they failed to understand basic economics while drowning in their own pessimism and lack of faith in the Bahamian people. Jcn's Lissie Bastian has more on the Prime Minister's wrap-up in this next report.
I know they never really understood our approach. They did not see how the strategic and targeted lowering of taxes combined with tax incentives would boost economic activity and increase government revenue at the same time. They did not see how empowering the Bahamian people financially leads to healthy revenue performance for the government. When they fail to understand basic economics, Madam Deputy Speaker, they drown in their own pessimism. But to the Bahamian people, the improvement in fiscal performance feels like a new day.
As he wrapped up debate on the 2022-2023 mid-year budget in the lower chamber Monday evening, Prime Minister Philip Davis took the official opposition to task, chastising the former administration and current leader Michael Pintard, who last month slammed the Prime Minister's budget communication as overly optimistic. But the Prime Minister accused the former minister-led administration of failing to meet budget projections during their 4 years in office, adding that throughout the debate, the opposition's commentary was that of typical political posturing.
Madam Speaker, our optimism seems to be at the heart of their argument. It means they think we are too filled with hope. It means they thought we were wrong to lower customs duties and lower VAT. It means they thought we were wrong to increase the tax exemption for first homeowners and wrong to increase our investment in agriculture. It means they think it was wrong to bet on the Bahamian people. Gone is a government constantly warning of imminent fiscal disaster. Instead, Bahamians can rely on steady, determined steps in the right direction. We have replaced perpetual crisis with calm and steady progress. We are not responsible for the opposition's confusion, nor their lack of faith in the Bahamian people. I encourage them to watch us and learn. They can take notes if they have to.
As he chastised the former administration, Prime Minister Davis says the opposition, instead of making ill-informed commentary, should be hanging their heads in shame and apologizing to the Bahamian people. He then touted that his administration is moving to see increased revenues and disciplined expenditures as it works toward a goal of 25% revenue to gross domestic product GDP ratio, which he contends is primarily fueled by increased efficiency and fairness in tax collection and a booming economy. The government successfully lowered the debt to GDP ratio from over 100% under the previous administration to just over 80%, and it is to continue decreases down to 65% by the 2026-2027 fiscal year. Spending is also on a downward trend in the first 6 months of the fiscal year 2021-2022. Expenditure was 12.6% of GDP. For the 2022-2023 fiscal period, it was 11.6% of GDP.
This administration has taken proactive measures to reduce the impact of inflation, including an increase in the minimum wage and addressing long outstanding public sector wages. As a result, we have directly poured tens of millions of dollars into the hands of ordinary, hard-working Bahamians and mandated the private sector to do the same. This has resulted in across-the-board salary increase for tens of thousands of public servants and a quality of life increase for all families reliant on the minimum wage to make ends meet. Don't you see that? The result of the increase in minimum wage meant that those persons received an extra 1 week's pay every month, or an increase of 24% in their basic salary. Don't you see that? Both of these moves were necessary to protect people as much as possible from the ravages of the global inflation crisis.
Despite concerns raised by the leader of the opposition last October, Prime Minister Davis says his government sees no downsizing by Bahamian businesses. In fact, what is being seen is expansion of current businesses, many new businesses springing up every day. He adds that the government's confidence and faith in Bahamians is being reciprocated as Bahamians invest more and propel the nation's economic growth. The mid-year budget will now head to the Senate for debate. For Jcn News, I'm Lissy Bastian.
Thanks for that report, Lissy. And finally, in this segment, the government is set to invest some $260 million into the development for 14 Family Island airports, subsequently transforming the country's aviation structure. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Tourism, Investments and Aviation, Chester Cooper, making that announcement during his contribution on the final day of the mid-year budget debate on Monday. Deputy Prime Minister Cooper says the government is using a public-private partnership approach to provide a solution for a brighter future beyond the current challenges and inefficiencies within the Family Island airports.
I've watched in pain, Mr. Deputy. All of our tourists and residents arrive to North Eleuthera, standing in the sun and the elements. This isn't going to be a quick fix, but this is going to fix those issues. We're going to invest more money in airports, and I hear the pundits talking about increase in user fees. We're going to release complete details on this, Mr. Deputy, but let me just say, this administration has demonstrated a commitment to the enhancement of the airport fee structures required to increase prospects for profitability, to better justify increasing these capital expenditures.
On March 1st, the Ministry of Tourism, Investments and Aviation launched its request for pre-qualification, the preliminary stage for the bidding process for the PPPs. In relation to there being reports of a negative reaction regarding the coming increase in user fees in the Family Islands, the Deputy Prime Minister says this.
What most don't know and don't focus on at the moment is that the government is already, taxpayers are already subsidizing these airports to the tune of $13 million a year in their current dilapidated state. Whether you use them or not, as a taxpayer, you continue to contribute. We can do better, and we will. Let me say that in the Family Islands, these airports will be a catalyst for growth, a catalyst for jobs and opportunities in construction, in retail, and myriad other businesses. This is going to be a renaissance for aviation in our country, and that is why we're calling it the Family Island Airport Renaissance Program. Resorts have complained, tourists have complained, locals have complained. We can do better, and we will.
The new airports will improve the runways to accommodate larger jets, and they will also bring with them new runway lights for the airports to operate longer hours, fire trucks, and other safety equipment. According to Deputy Prime Minister Cooper, the government has also ensured ongoing partnerships with the Inter-American Development Bank in the Family Island Airport Renaissance Program, and he says the government has also committed to exploring other creative options to enhance the financial success of Family Island airports. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back after these commercials.